This is Bob Andelman, and you're listening to and hopefully watching the Mr. Media interview with former Spy and Playboy magazine editor Jamie Malanowski, whose new book is And the War Came, the 6 months that tore America apart. Jamie, we got to talk a lot between segments, and I gather you do not mind if we talk a little bit about Spy and about Playboy.
No.
All right. So at Spy, you were responsible for a lot of the brilliant work in the fine print, which for people who may not recall or never saw it, Spy, one of the many things that it did that kind of revolutionized print magazines at the time was in the opening section of the book, down the left and the right column, there'd be this really tiny type that was just packed with material. And I wondered if you had any particular favorites from that time.
There are a couple things that really stand out. One, I had a transcript of a bunch of Republican senators talking to Saddam Hussein that had been referenced but not quoted in a William Safire column. And I said, well, this is really weird. Let me just go get it. And it's all these quotes of people like Bob Dole and so forth flattering Saddam Hussein, who was at that time about to go off the deep end. But they were trying to, in a diplomatic way, I guess, make nice with him and keep him from doing terrible stuff. But, of course, flattery reads poorly. I mean, it reflects poorly on the flatterer. So you should never allow yourself to be recorded when committing flattery. So that was one I always really liked. It was not one of the, I mean, people will always look at like the restaurant health code violations as among their very favorites.
Reading my mind.
People love that, but it was so easy to do that I never really liked it. And it was, I felt it was like, I felt like that musician who keeps constantly being asked to play his hit. Because people say, why don't you do more restaurant health code violations? I'm like, oh, come on, it's just so boring. You just have to go over to the health department, they give it to you. It's so simple. So I did it because people loved it, but it was never one of my particular favorites. I like the ones that had that were a little harder to find and a little more rewarding. I remember one time we did one that was just all about lawsuits that Sylvester Stallone was involved in. And apparently, it was like 15 of them. And he was suing his landscaper, and he was suing a guy who did, work on his cars, and he was suing his neighbor because the neighbor's tree. And all of a sudden you get this image of this amazing litigious guy who sues about every little thing. It was really revelatory. It's like, it's something you never would have expected of anybody, let alone, Rocky. But here he was suing everybody that he ever apparently crossed his path and looked at him funny. So I like that one all a lot. I liked one we did one time where we did all of the New York City Consumer Protection had a squad of people who went out and made bingo games in the city were on the up and up. I don't know. I guess maybe there was a time when, I don't know, it was in the hands of the mafia. I don't know what. But, you got all of these really, once you read the record of the violations, it was, somebody didn't have the right colored chips. And it was hilarious to see, Saint Roman and Kazimierz, Lithuanian Catholic Church written up for, some sort of minor violation and getting a $15 fine. It was just, I thought it was hilarious. And soon after we published, they closed the bingo squad. So, but that was one of my favorites.
Was there a written standard at Spy for what was a fine print item and what wasn't, or was it something that you guys on the staff just knew what was and what wasn't?
There were. The standard was anything that was actually in print. So you didn't go out and report these things or follow up with interviews or get somebody else to interpret. It was just stuff that would stand alone on print and kind of, and the model was, a government agency record or something like that. But you ended up with transcripts. You ended up with, we did something that was pretty great one time, which was just the synopsis of a federal agent's filing in support of a continued wiretap on a suspected syndicate figure in Los Angeles. And so it wasn't any of the dialogue that they overheard, but it was just like in Section 1 to Section 50, suspect Bob Edelman was overheard speaking to, and then it'd be some famous person, and then it'd be suspect Bob Edelman was then, interviewing, this famous rock star. And it was all of a sudden you realized, what the hell is going on here? That this man's having all these conversations with all these people, and it was illuminating. It was illuminating to see what was going on.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, you would read about a person or a place or an institution, and it seemed to supply information. I don't know. Maybe you could say colored in around the edges a little bit, and when you put all of these bits together, you got a very different picture than if, say, Vanity Fair had profiled the same person or institution.
Yeah, exactly. And in some ways, because you weren't trying to make some contentious point, your obligation to be fair was obviated in some way. I mean, all you're doing is putting down what's here on this piece of paper. I don't have to be fair to the piece of paper. Somebody's going to repeat it. And so it was interesting. It was, and then other things were just, one of my favorite things was just a long list of the amount of junk that went up into NASA space shuttle missions. Because they would take all these little, you're an astronaut and you would take up 10 rolls of dimes. And so that you would come back to Earth and, give away, this dime was in space. You'd have 500 little American flags. There's all these little gewgaws and, souvenir stuff. It was really weird that this is all being included in your space dollars. So that was fun. Those were all fun.
Now, I spent a lot of time in the 80s in newsrooms, in the St. Pete Times and the Tampa Tribune, and being around a lot of magazines. And maybe it's in my mind, but I want to think that there was something special about being around the offices at SPY. Would I be wrong about that?
It was the best place I ever worked, and it was a place where I went and I laughed every day, which hasn't happened since. I mean, not every day. And it was hilarious. And you always there was a sense of, like a lot of little laboratories where people were always working on, people were cooking up a prank. Somebody else was, John Connolly was doing an investigation. Somebody else was, had some other funny thing going on. You had people coming in who had been to, Bohemian Grove or someplace with their stories. It was, sort of a constant show. It was just great.
Now, one more question about SPY. I mentioned to you during the break. I had this handy. This, of course, is SPY: The Funny Years by. I'll get them in order. Kurt Anderson, Graydon Carter, and of course your pal George Kalogerakis. Was there anything in this book? Was there anything left out of this book that you wish that the guys had told? Any story or any anecdote where after you read it, you went, you missed a really good one?
I must say I didn't commit the book to memory, so I don't really know what they might have left out or didn't leave out. I would say one thing that, the contributions of my colleague, Susan Morrison, I didn't think got quite the credit that she deserved there. But anyway, but there were a lot of funny things that we did. One of the funniest, and I really don't know whether they got to go into it in depth, was we created an agent named Jack Fine who called up TV shows, crappy TV shows like Full House. And Jack would say, to get a producer on the line, and he'd say, I represent Max von Sydow or Vanessa Redgrave or some really eminent person. Vanessa really loves the show, and she's wondering if you could, figure out a character for her to be on. And these people would just trip over themselves trying to figure out how to get Vanessa Redgrave onto Full House. And it was just, it was so funny, and it was so mean to these poor people that we had to kill Jack off because we loved him too much. We wanted to play with him more and more, and it was just too mean. So after we had Jack do that, then the next week we killed Jack, and and then went around and got quotes from people who were expressed their sympathy, people like Liz Smith and so forth, who printed sympathy, lines of sympathy for this man who never existed. But that was the last time we played with him. But I really liked Jack, and he was a lot of fun.
That's funny. Well,
Yeah.
let's jump ahead now. In 2004, you joined Playboy, and I remember when I first saw your name in there, I thought, is this Playboy trying to capture a little bit of that spy magic? Or, I mean, what was kind of your... You didn't go in as ME, as I recall. I think you went in...
No, I was there about 6 months before I became managing editor.
And what were they looking for when they hired Jamie Malanowski at Playboy? What are they looking for?
Well, I think basically they were looking for a magazine professional who, had a sense of humor, but who could do a lot of different things. And, after I left Spy, I worked at a lot of different places. I've always freelanced at a lot of places. I did worked at Time for a while, worked at Entertainment Weekly for a while, worked at Esquire for a while. So I developed a lot of different capabilities beyond strictly humor stuff I could do at Spy. And so I think they appreciated my versatility. I had written a number of pieces for Playboy from the editor Chris Napolitano prior to 2004. So he kind of, knew what he was getting, and he had a reasonably young staff, and I think he thought an opportunity to kind of hire someone who could be the club pro, in a way, and add, just that little note of professionalism that would help them perfect their acts.
Now, what did you expect Playboy to be like, to work for, and what was it actually like? Was there a difference between the two?
I thought the big thing that was a surprise about working at Playboy was that it was a very formulaic magazine. I mean, basically it had a winning formula, and so they thought, why mess with it? And so there was not much, there was not that sense of urgency to let's figure out something new and different. It was let's deliver on the specs of the thing every month. And so people got good at doing that. And whenever we would, get excited about doing something different, invariably Hefner would shoot it down because Hefner wasn't interested in expanding the kind of creative portfolio of the magazine. He was interested in sort of, delivering, the dog likes the dog food, let's bring the dog food. So that's a little unkind way to put it. But basically, if you like last month's issue, you'll like this month's issue, and you'll like next month's issue too.
Well, and it's funny. I know as someone who read and subscribed to that magazine for 30 years. I mean, I started getting it when I was, I've told this before on the show, I started getting it when I was 13. I actually subscribed and continued getting it for years and years and years. And only, 2 or 3 years ago, actually stopped the subscription. Part of it is, you've seen one, you've seen them both, and when you've seen them both 100,000 times, you can be a little jaded. But really, it was what you described. It kind of reached a point where I felt like I was reading the same thing month after month. Celebrities were not as prone to either be interviewed or, in the women's case, to be photographed by them because there were so many other places that they could go and maybe have more control over it or just have a different experience. That it wasn't compelling. I mean, even the interview wasn't as compelling after a certain point as it used to be. They were, and I think some of this is generational. You reach a point where they're interviewing people for 10 or 15 pages. I don't even know who these people are anymore.
Right.
And I think they're, Monday morning quarterbacking, I mean, I think now they're paying a price for staying with the same formula for so long.
I worked at Playboy, which had just celebrated its 50th anniversary before I got there. I worked at Us, which was next to Rolling Stone, which had been around a very long time. Worked at Time, which celebrated its 75th anniversary while I was there. All magazines, have a kind of middle-aged, midlife crisis where, where they need to change, but change is enormously risky because you alienate the group that got you to this point of popularity. There was a point in the 70s when Playboy was selling 7.5 million copies a month. 7.5 million. Now it's down to around 2 million, I think, 2.2.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on the exact number. I might be wrong by a bit. But, once they started losing, which was well before I was there, but once they started losing, I don't think they really knew what to do. So they just kind of kept doubling down on the things they thought they were doing well. And it became difficult to to adapt. And I do think that Hefner was a kind of a brilliant editor, magazine editor. I mean, at one point in time in the 50s and 60s, his view of the world that he was able to manifest in the magazine was kind of like a thing that men wanted. It was really brilliant. But he lost that, and yet still kept control of the magazine, and it still tended to reflect his interests long past the time when it ought to have been passed to somebody else who would have innovated in a different way.
I think two cautionary tales come to mind. Newsweek a couple years ago basically was forced to go in and hack everything it did to death and become it was just a graveyard of opinion pieces that you didn't even know who this person was who was offering their opinion, and they damn near died because of that. And I think I give her credit. I think Tina Brown's done a real good job of reviving that. But then I think the way that Playboy might have succeeded in going is what David Granger has done with Esquire. I gave up Esquire for dead years ago, and it just seems like now every month I get it. Yeah, there's still some months where I find nothing to read, but on the whole, I look forward to getting it because it just seems to capture the moment very well. And they've actually gone in Playboy's direction a little bit. There's a lot of naughty pictures. There's so anyway, just
I agree. I like Esquire very, very much, and I think they do a good job. And there's always stuff that's interesting to read. Like GQ is another men's magazine that does pretty well. I mean, I think one of the things that there was a point in time when Playboy was cutting edge in terms of its coverage of sexuality and sexual issues, and now it is no longer that. And now it is wallpaper on the party bus or something. It's just not. It's no longer and maybe cannot even aspire to being that. Having that status. But if that's what I would try to recover, that sense of, and Playboy is still one of the very few magazines that treats sexual issues seriously. Our friend Chip Rowe writes about them, that they talk about sexual phenomenon and people's sexual interests and their issues. They treat it very seriously and honorably and with kind of intellectual credibility, and a lot of other publications are silly about it or nonsensical about it. So I mean, I would have tried to somehow continue to maintain Playboy's unique selling proposition in the way that they once earned it.
I'd love to see Chip get a shot at the editor's chair one day before his run there completes. I'd be curious to see what he does with it. And the last thing I'll say about Playboy, and we'll start to wrap up, is The thing I've tried to point out to them is, I don't know if you ever get to listen to Playboy Radio. It's on Sirius and wherever else. I think Playboy Radio should be the model for what they do with the magazine in the future. I think they capture that combination. I mean, they're not serious. They don't, in terms of serious topics, they don't have that. But if they could bring the fun and the sexuality of Playboy Radio to the magazine and integrate some of those elements, I think they'd get themselves another generation of readership. But
the best manifestation of Playboy and the Playboy kind of attitude and message was Sex in the City. Best one in recent.
It was
Sex in the City.
Oh yeah.
Those four women were Playboy men of 1964, and somehow, so this idea was alive. They just were knocking on the wrong door or whatever. But there was, it's out there someplace to be captured.
Well, Jamie, we've covered a lot of stuff. This has been a great treat for me. So you've got a book out now, and The War Came.
Yes.
What, are you working on something new, or do you have and I have to ask, is there a website? Can people find you at all online anywhere?
I do have my own website, JamieMalanowski.com. I have a blog there. I'm not working on anything right now. We're working very hard on the Civil War book, on The War Came, and so we're kind of catching our breath. And I'm doing some other work for some other folks. And but I've got a few ideas that I'm flirting with, and we'll see what comes around.
Very good. Well, folks, listen, you can order Jamie Malanowski's new book, And the War Came, the 6 months that tore America apart, at great ebook stores everywhere, or you can order it right now at a great price at MrMedia.com. And Jamie, boy, what a fun time this has been for me. I appreciate you enduring all the questions and the Inquisition. Unique.
Let's do it again. I enjoyed it.
That'd be great. A unique moment for me, and thank you so much for joining us on Mr. Media today.
You're welcome.
All right. And folks, of course, for more original interviews with America's top authors, you can surf over to our main website, mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. If you've enjoyed today's show, subscribe for free to Mr. Media via email, RSS, or iTunes, or check out our new, I can't believe I'm saying this, our new app, mobile app. It's in the Android marketplace, hopefully coming soon to the iTunes store, the Apple App Store. But it's Mr. Media Interviews. Just look that up in the marketplace. You can also listen with a piece of string and a tin can in many parts of Manhattan. Show your support of Mr. Media by supporting our sponsors, including Audible. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/radio. Again, that's audibletrial.com/radio for your free audiobook. We're also supported by thepartyauthority.us. Call DJ Ira for all your party entertainment needs nationwide at 1-800-DIAL-DJs. Or visit their website. I lost my place. Visit their website, thepartyauthority.us. If you've got an idea for a guest, a comment on today's show, or would like to advertise on Mr. Media, email me directly at bob@mrmedia.com. You can also call our 24-hour listener line, 1-727-498-4711, to leave a message. Now, some messages may be used in an upcoming show, and depending on where you're calling from, there may be a toll charge. You can also follow Mr. Media on Facebook, Twitter, or our new YouTube video channel. Thanks so much for joining us. I always appreciate you giving up a piece of your day and spending it with us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. See you next time, everybody. Hey folks, you can hear Mr. Media while on the go now with Stitcher Smart Radio. Stitcher is a free news and talk mobile app available for your smartphone, whether you use an iPhone, iPod Touch, Android, BlackBerry Curve, or Palm Pre. And when you download Stitcher to hear Mr. Media today, you have a chance to win some real money. Downloading is quick and easy. Just find Stitcher in your smartphone's app store. Download it, it's free, takes seconds. Then, during registration, hit the promo code box and enter Mr. Media, that's MR Media, to get automatically entered to win $100. The latest episode of Mr. Media will be waiting for you in Stitcher's favorites right on your phone. You'll get access to lots of other amazing shows too, always available to you on demand, no syncing. Some of my favorites include WTF with Mark Maron, Plus One Per Diem with Kevin Smith, and The Nerdist with Chris Hardwick. It's all free and all instant to you on Stitcher Smart Radio. And don't forget to win the money. Enter promo code Mr. Media, MR Media, when you register. And thanks for listening.